On behalf of the National Eagle Scout Training Committee and myself, we would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy weekend to join us for today's webinar. The webinar will be recorded and posted on the NESA.org website under training. My name is Ross Arnold, and I'm the outgoing Vice President of the NESA Training Committee. Joining me on the panel today is Michael Burris, the incoming Vice President of the NESA Training Committee. Our host today is Matt Wallace, who is the Program Manager in the National Alumni Relations Office. During the webinar, the chat function will be turned off, but we have provided a Q&A button at the bottom or maybe at the top of your screen. Throughout the presentation, you may submit your questions to the panel. They will do their best to answer your questions while the presentation is taking place. We ask that you stay on topic. Questions off topic will not be answered. Panelists will do their best to answer the questions. Um, they will write questions. They will write down questions that they could not get to or could not answer. These questions will be shared with Mark and Tom, who will answer these questions at the end of the presentation. If you have questions after the webinar and we've turned off the webinar, you may go to nesa.org, look for Contact Us, and you can submit your question and it will be sent to the proper person. Before we get started, I'd like to encourage, um, I would like to, I would like to encourage all the Eagle Scouts participating in this webinar to join the National Eagle Scout Association and become also legacy members. To be a NESA and/or a legacy member, please go to nesa.org. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today, Mark Frederick and Tom Parker. Mark Frederick, PhD, is an educator, scholar trained in psychology with an emphasis on interpersonal communications, student development, and organizational learning. Former instructor at Indiana State University, he has authored and co-authored peer-reviewed research, national assessment reports, scholarly books examining learning outcomes and student success. He is also a Vigil Honor member, a Silver Beaver recipient. Uh, he also has contributed sustained professional and volunteer services through leadership, training, program development in education, and youth serving organization. Tom Parker is in his 46th year in scouting, have started as a Cub Scout in 1953, moving up through the ranks and leadership positions, while also serving as 24 years as a special agent with the FBI. He retired in 1994 as a assistant special agent in charge in Los Angeles FBI field office. He earned his Eagle Scout in 1958, is a life member of NESA, and also holds the Silver Beaver Award. His son and 4 grandsons are also Eagle Scouts. Tom holds a master's degree in management education and has taught management and leadership courses at the FBI Academy and at the college level and at Philmont. Take it away, Mark and Tom.
Good evening, everyone. We're glad to have you join us here, and we want to thank you for that, and thank you for carving out the time to be here. Mentorship, as you may know, is one of those things that we talk about all the time in scouting. In fact, it is a major part of the scouting program, though you may not hear that word used very often. But when it's done well, it doesn't feel like a program. It feels like something really personal for those who are involved in it. Most of us can point to someone who shaped how we lead, how we think, maybe even how we show up in difficult moments. That's the personal side of mentorship, but there's also an institutional side. When mentorship is consistent, intentional, and shared across the council, it really does change outcomes, not just for individual scouts, but for the culture of the entire units.
So today, we're working on both levels at the same time. First, we'll talk about how to support individual mentors and mentees through talking about what actually works, what doesn't work, and where people tend to drift off course as they move through the mentorship relationship. And second, We'll be talking about how to begin thinking about something bigger, a council-wide mentoring approach that isn't dependent on luck or personalities, but rather built with structure, clarity, and intentionality. We're not aiming for perfection here, folks. We're aiming for repeatability.
Now, before anything else that we're going to get into tonight, we need to anchor this in youth protection, not as a formality, but as a framework that makes mentorship safe and sustainable. Two things to keep front and center: the too deep leadership role, no one-on-one situations without proper coverage, and digital communication boundaries. In other words, no private, unmonitored conversations, no group messages, group messages, parents copied on those communications, and transparency at all times.
And just as important is documentation and reporting. If something just feels off, folks, it gets documented. Make a record of it. If something crosses a line, it gets reported. No hesitation, no internal negotiation. It's reported. See, mentorship only works when trust is protected, not assumed. So let's get specific about what we mean by mentorship. At its core, mentorship is a relationship built on trust, modeling, and encouragement. It's not about transferring knowledge from the mentor to the mentee. It's about shaping judgment on the part of the mentee.
And in scouting, as you know, there's a line we don't cross. Advancement is scout-led. A mentor doesn't steer the wheel. They sit in the passenger seat and ask better questions. They help the scout think, but not decide for them.
And at this point in time, it's probably important that we talk about what mentorship is not. Mentorship is not actively managing the scout's time or the scout's timeline. It's not about solving problems for the scout. Mentoring isn't rewriting their plans to make them better. And it's not about turning their project into your project.
If your scout's work starts looking like an adult's work, something's off, something's not being done right. Mentorship should feel like support, like coaching, not control. Now we get into where mentorship either becomes meaningful or just another conversation that doesn't go anywhere. Every mentorship relationship needs a clear purpose, not a general growth, not helping where needed, something specific. And the question we have to ask ourselves as mentors is, why this scout? Why now?
So it's really important to begin with the needs assessment to really understand what the relationship is going to be and how to keep it grounded. You need to figure out what it is that the scout actually needs, not what you assume the scout needs. And be aware of the relationship as it grows and matures, and look for signs. Is a scout struggling with planning, communication, confidence, follow through? You don't get to meaningful goals until you understand the gaps.
From there, you need to define specific individualized goals for the mentee, not vague targets like improve leadership. Instead, the mentor needs to lead a planning meeting independently, present a project plan to a review board. I'm sorry, this is for the mentee. Lead a planning meeting independently, present a project plan to a review board, navigate a setback, and revise the plan. In other words, something concrete, something observable, something measurable.
And then it comes to balance. And the balance most mentors struggle with comes from not really understanding and identifying the mentee's needs or understanding best practices and experience. As the mentor, you're looking to blend those two together to ensure that the mentoring relationship works as best possible. But you're not forcing the combination. You're merely guiding it. The scout still owns it.
At some point, you need mutual agreement. Not, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead here. And this is where tone matters. Too much warmth without accountability, and nothing moves forward the way you want it to. Too much pressure without relationship, and the scout will disengage. You're constantly, as a mentor, you're constantly adjusting. Support versus independence, encouragement versus expectation. And go ahead.
And we were doing really well right until there, weren't we? Yeah. At some time, at some point, and hopefully early on in the relationship, you need mutual agreement, defined agreement, not assumed agreement, but agreement you talk together about. Both the mentor and the mentee at any point in time should be able to clearly say, here's what we're working toward. Here's what we're actually going to do. And here's how we'll know if it's working. If those things aren't clear, the relationship tends to drift. So good mentorship does not start with availability. It starts with fit. You're not just assigning adults to scouts. You're building a working relationship.
You need to look at criteria like what is the communication style being used? What relevant experience can be applied to the relationship? What's the temperament? Is there a fit between the temperament of the mentor and the mentee? And there has to be a willingness to invest time. And just as important is the ability to step back when needed. That's for the mentor.
Stepping back when needed is the really challenging part in a lot of mentoring relationships because we as adults want to help. We want to save. But our job is not to save the scout. Our job is to help the scout understand how to save her or himself. And there's something often skipped, and that is that mutual agreement I talked about just a bit ago. Both the mentor and mentee should have the chance to say, yes, this works. And that includes agreement on goals, the various processes that'll be engaged along the way, and what success is going to look like. And don't assume mentors are ready just because they volunteered. Mentors and some of their pairings of the mentors and mentees need varying degrees of orientation, clear expectations, feedback structures, ongoing support. If you don't build that in, you're relying on guesswork. So it's really important to develop some sort of training program for mentors so they might engage their work more effectively along the way.
In terms of talking about building the mentoring partnership, the mentoring relationship, once the pairing is in place between the mentor and the mentee, that's when the real work begins. You need feedback loops, not occasional check-ins, but consistent, expected conversations, conversations that will produce information for both the mentor and the mentee. What's working, what isn't.
You're starting to see a theme of what we're talking about here. The checking in, the constant assessment of what's going on, taking the temperature, the pulse, checking the health of the relationship is an ongoing, never-ending process. A mentor who becomes a little bit in automatic mode is probably going to be the mentor that sees the relationship beginning to dissolve and fade over time. So the checking in is really critical. And here's the thing too, don't skip the celebration. And I'm not talking about the celebration that comes when the scout eventually earns their Eagle degree. I'm talking about celebrating and recognizing good work along the way because small wins matter as well. And celebrating those small wins is part of the reinforcement and the learning process that's taking place because small wins matter, such as if a meeting is well led by the scout, if a plan is completed, or various stages of the plan are completed. If a problem is solved without intervention, there's a whole litany of successes that you as the mentor need to be aware of, identify, and recognize the scout for that growth, because recognition reinforces future behavior.
And when both the mentor and the mentee feel progress, the relationship strengthens. When progress is invisible, however, momentum starts to fade, and both sides can end up in a position of losing interest in continuing with the process, which is very unfortunate.
So there's a basic framework that drives the success of mentoring relationships in general. And we see these as being 10 core components, put it that way, that drive consistency. And consistency drives results. So let's focus on those 10 components that show up in effective mentorship again and again. And it begins with clarity of purpose. And again, a purposeful mentorship relationship always attends to what are we doing, why are we doing it, and how we're going to get there at the end. So clarity of purpose. We talked about this, mutual expectations. You have to engage communications with the scout to always check what is the scout expecting and to share what you're expecting as time rolls along, and to define goals, methods, and an action plan.
Then come the ground rules, especially around any friction points that may have developed in the relationship or in the discussions. But regular communication and confidentiality are still the keys to success.
And when it comes to confidentiality, understand that we're all mandated reporters. So we're not talking about confidentiality and those things that the law demands that we report. We're talking about confidentiality of your conversations, of what you say to one another. Confidentiality is a key strategy in maintaining a healthy relationship. When the scout knows that you can be trusted as a mentor, they'll be more open with you, and that is healthy for the relationship. And there's a base. Whoop, where am I going? Yeah. And finally, accountability processes and clear success criteria. And a plan for closure of the mentoring relationship, because eventually it's going to come to an end, but not just an ending, but recognizing what was achieved along that relationship. And not one piece of any of this carries a system. It's the combination of everything that works.
Ground rules, as a reminder here, ground rules aren't about control. They're about preventing avoidable problems. Start with time, start on time, respect it, use intentionality. Use it to foster the relationship, use it to accomplish the goals that have been set with the mentoring process.
Roles should be obvious to both people. The mentee sets the agenda and sends it ahead. The mentor shows up prepared to engage, but not to dominate.
The mentor asks questions. He or she listens, reflects. They may offer advice, but they don't take over. And that's a basic rule, that they do not take over. They guide, they coach.
And frankly, that's the one piece that mentors often find the most frustrating. Again, as adults, we want to save people. We want to save them from pain. We want to save them from discomfort. But the pain and discomfort of a scout moving along the process, her or himself, is part of the learning process. And if we continually save them, they're not learning. All we're doing is bolstering dependence on us. And we're looking to build independence on the part of the scout. So communication has to stay open and direct. And if necessary, document information to ensure that important things discussed aren't forgotten. If you're deeply engaged in a conversation, you may be fully attentive, fully aware of that scout's concern, but by the time the conversation is over, that may have left your active memory. So jot it down, make notes. That helps you remember the important things.
And,
So,
and go
yep.
ahead.
Nope.
And closure matters. How you bring an end to the project you had here, both on the part of the mentor and the willingness of the mentee to accept it. Closure matters. There's an old saying in planning that if you don't know where you're going, when you get there, there you are. And you don't want that problem in any mentorship relationship. Both sides need to understand what the goals were and what the method was that was used to achieve those goals. Uh, Closure does matter, and whether the relationship worked or didn't work, there needs to be a conversation. What did we learn? What changes should be made going forward? That's where a lot of the value actually gets locked in any mentorship process.
So, and here's a one-liner for you. A mentorship without a work plan is just a series of conversations. To turn those conversations into true mentoring, you need clear learning goals, defined objectives, and specific tasks.
Then you have to layer in the resources, the timelines, the checkpoints that you worked with or want to still work with, and a way to measure progress that both people understand. Again, I go back to that old saying, when you get to the end, if you don't know where you were going, there you are. If you can't measure it, you'll argue about whether it happened or not, and you don't want to be in that position. Now, let's scale it a little bit. If you're building this across a district or a council, start with a vision. What are you actually trying to change? Completion rates, project quality, leadership development?
Then you identify where the need is the greatest. Not every unit needs the same level of support. Not every district may need the same level of support. Focus where mentorship will make a measurable difference.
From there, set program guidelines, define the mentor criteria, build the leadership team, both volunteer and professional.
And we're right back to it. Train the mentors in good mentorship practices, skills, and understanding. And don't assume alignment automatically occurs on its own. You have to consciously create it. Then define how you'll identify scouts who would benefit most from the relationship, considering critical factors on the slide.
And as national resources become available, like the NESA mentoring guide, use them. But don't wait for perfect materials to start building something workable. You need to work on that throughout the process, and most definitely as you're starting to bring some conclusion to that process. It has to be workable.
We packed a lot of information into a very short period of time because we want to open it to questions and comments you might have. You know, the backstage team has been addressing some of the questions and comments you've had, but let's do this and see if we have some questions and answers that we have to address. Nothing is out there yet. So we were talking a little bit earlier in our rehearsal earlier today, Tom, and I asked you if you had a particular experience with mentoring that you might want to share with the folks tuning in tonight. And you shared something with me, and I wonder if you feel free to repeat that for the folks out there.
Very much so, Mark. It's an experience. I'd not had one quite like it in the past in terms of mentoring, not only in my professional life but also in scouting. And this revolves around a young man from Africa who came to the United States on a full scholarship at a private school here in Central California, where I live. And they needed a family to be kind of his surrogate family, his surrogate parents while he was here. My wife and I volunteered. And what we found was he was a very, very intelligent young man, 15 years old when he came here. And he's been here 2 years now, but he didn't know much about our country. He didn't know much about our habits, our social programs, and he didn't know a lot about the American school system. So in working with him, it became very clear that he knew a little bit about scouting. He'd been a Cub Scout back in his home country, a little different type of program than what we have here. But he also recognized as he learned more about scouting that the opportunity to become an Eagle Scout would be perhaps very beneficial for him, especially when it comes to here he is, a foreign student trying to get into an American university, American college. He's very, very skilled in high technology, in mathematics, and a lot of the different sciences. But the fact that he comes from a poor country, a poor family, he's been very, very concerned about qualifying for a college or qualifying for a scholarship. So together, as I talked with him, he suddenly decided that he would like to become an Eagle Scout, and he felt that would help him. So we sat down, we went through the what's required to make an Eagle Scout, the various merit badges, and it was all done through a guiding process rather than a telling. As a result of that, he worked a job last summer at a scout camp on one of the islands off the coast of California here. He loved it. He actually earned a number of merit badges towards Eagle while he was there. And he got asked to come back this year to the staff again. In fact, they pleaded that he would come back. And we find out that he had learned so much about leadership, about doing things the right way, about seeking advice. And every time he came to our house, we would sit and have long conversations where I would ask him, is this the path he wanted to go? How did he want to go on and complete the other requirements? And it got him thinking. We drew up some written plans. He actually drew them up with my coaching, and he's now back at summer camp. In fact, he left today to go back to that same summer camp and is looking forward to it. And this time he's been given some leadership positions out there, which of course are part of the requirements for Eagle. So this is a case where mentorship was occurring, and I didn't realize it quite at first, but the more we got into it, we realized this is a perfect example of what we're talking about here today. And I'm really anxious to hear how the 6 weeks on the staff at summer camp is really going to benefit. I also found out that he has been asked at the boarding school that he attends to be what's called the prefect. He will be in charge of a dorm, and these are high school students. He'll be a senior. He's going to be a prefect in the dorm, which is another leadership position that will qualify him for Eagle. And I've never seen him as enthused as he is at this point in time. And like I said, it was mentorship that was occurring without really stopping and sitting down and formalizing the program that we were trying to do. It just happened. And sometimes that is the best form of mentorship.
An organic process. You know, I look back at my summer camp staff experiences here in the Midwest with mosquitoes, blistering heat during the day, intolerable humidity at night. And this student is going, where is he serving his summer camp experience?
It's on Catalina Island. It's
Catalina,
Camp Emerald Bay. It's part of the Western Los Angeles County Council.
He'll have a much finer time weather and environment wise than I did. Hey, we did have a question come in, and we were told to keep our answers fast and short. This isn't going to allow us to do this because the question is foundational. It is what is the biggest challenge in forming an effective mentorship relationship? And Mike, I'll give you a couple minutes while I talk. It's kind of an introduction here. I'm going to answer this from a psychological perspective, but I'd like you to answer it from your own lived experience, if you would. What did you find the biggest challenge of forming an effective mentoring relationship? And not just in forming, let's expand that a little bit, but to include both forming and maintaining the relationship.
You asking me, Mark? Or
Yeah.
I think the biggest obstacle that can get in the way, and I found this in terms of my former career. When I ended up in management within the FBI, I had to work with a lot of new young agents right out of college that came in, had been selected. But the biggest thing was dealing with the egos and primarily dealing with my own ego, that I knew the business, I'd come up through the ranks, and to keep the ego in check and respond to what their needs were, to identify their needs, to respond to them, and then to guide them into finding the solutions for themselves. And then, of course, if they were on the right track, to praise them for it, to commend them being able to employ what they had learned or what we had talked about. But keeping those egos in check was a big part of the process.
And I think it's important to attend to a reality here that attending to and keeping the ego in check occurs at the beginning of the relationship and continues throughout. It's not something you take care of at the beginning and it's done. It has to be constantly monitored. So the biggest challenge in forming and maintaining effective mentoring relationship is how to most effectively manage the relationship. And from a psychological lesson, I'm going to bring in Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was a preeminent psychologist with most of his work done in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. But his influence and impact on the psychology community is still reflected today in the therapy rooms across the nation by almost every therapist, counselor, and psychologist there is. And we call these Rogerian principles. And they're so effective in counseling and clinical settings, but they're incredibly effective in any other kind of setting as well. Whether it's a relationship with a significant other, extended family members, whether it's a relationship with coworkers, if you're management and working with other people, it works in school and in religious communities, and it works in mentoring. So I'm going to talk to you about what Rogers talked about as being three critical core elements to maintaining a relationship. The first is to engage empathic understanding. And empathy is being tossed around politically right now, and from a psychologist's perspective, that infuriates me because empathy is a skill that, when engaged, does miraculous things. Empathy is literally your ability to get inside someone's head and look through their eyes, to understand that person's worldview, to understand the assumptions that person is making that guide their lives. And the better you understand those, the better you'll be able to communicate because you're on their turf when you're engaging empathy. You're not asking them to come over to your turf. So empathic understanding is the first core element. The second core element is unconditional positive regard. And this is really at the heart of the scouting mentorship. It's valuing the scout as a capable, growing person, no matter where they are in the process. You need to actively separate the scout from their struggle. Their struggle can be challenging. Their struggle can trigger you, but the scout never should. The scout should be accepted without anything other than positive regard. And this fosters resilience and keeps a scout from feeling judged or compared to others. If you're judging as a mentor, you're thrusting your worldview into their worldview. And as in doing that, taking a little bit of control, we're trying to teach them from themselves. So in practice, unconditional positive regard means supporting their ideas, even when they're rough, and guiding them, gently guiding them to refine those ideas rather than replacing their ideas with your ideas. And the third critical element is what Rogers called congruence, but we'll call it genuineness here. We're pretty good as people, but younger people are really good at spotting inauthenticity. They're really good at spotting if what we're saying and what we're doing are consistent and complementary, or if they're at odds with one another. They're incredibly perceptive when it comes to engaging you in a conversation and knowing you just checked out because you're busy thinking about the next day's work schedule or what's for dinner or the family problems you're facing. Anything that takes attention off the scout, off the mentee, and into your life is attention taken away from a critical element of the mentoring process. So the congruence. You're there and present with that scout at all times, understanding the world from their point of view and not judging them, but rather accepting them who they are and gently guiding them in a way that will help them learn, grow, and develop. So, what is the name of the psychologist Mark is talking about? Can you show it in print? Carl R. Rogers, Rogers. And anyone on the face of the planet would do well just reading some of the basic. It's very understandable. He wrote for the lay public, essentially. But in this model he had in psychology, he easily transformed to education. And I wish more educators were familiar with the work of Rogers. Let's see.
Mark, if I could jump in for just a minute, I think,
Yep.
and you've touched on it, and hopefully we've touched on it a couple of times through this presentation. If there's one thing that we hope that the attendees will take home from this presentation, is the thought that mentorship doesn't improve by accident. It takes a concentrated effort. And there's an old saying also that mentorship makes sense. And I think that's a truism that has to be remembered throughout the process. The process works, it makes sense, and if both sides are committed to it, success will probably be achieved.
This is Ross again. There's a question from Larry. It's a great question. I'm glad he brought it up. We've been sort of focused on scouts to become Eagle Scouts, but it doesn't have to be the end. When someone receives their Eagle Scout Award, they're done. Mentorship can go on after they get their Eagle, and they you one of the things all of us have in common, we all worked at some point. Some of us are retired, but we certainly can mentor our scouts into the work world, into careers. Through our experiences, we could share resources with these new new Eagle Scouts. And the mentorship does not have to end specifically when they get Eagle Scout. That was the goal. Now, once they get their Eagle Scout, they have other goals coming up too. I don't know if a lot of people do this, but no one in my family had ever gone to college. So I had no one to ask, how do you do this college stuff? But I knew how to become an Eagle Scout because I became one. So I used those principles I learned to becoming the Eagle Scout to get me through college. Do you guys want to address that of mentoring beyond Eagle?
Yeah, I want to mention that you just defined a successful mentoring relationship because you found yourself in a foreign place, never been to college, nobody in the family college, but you had the skills developed to the point that you were able to effectively manage your own movement through college. So, and the question specifically was, as a follow-up, when do you know the mentorship relationship has been successful, not only in achieving Eagle, but life? And Ross, you're right. Some mentorship relationships span years and decades. That's not uncommon. But more often than not, the mentor relationship ends because life changes. They do go to college, they do move away. And unfortunately, and I'll answer this again from a psychological perspective, most psychologists don't know the long-term implications of the work they did with the clients because we're not around to see that success. So the best we can do in some cases is to, and as you recall in the presentation, constantly checking in, constantly checking the progress, constantly measuring progress against the benchmarks and the goals that were laid out. As you see these achievements being made, and you as the mentor see the discomforts, the pain, the failures, the successes, and you see that growth, learning, and development are occurring, you're doing your job. And if they do indeed achieve the Eagle rank, that's great. But you may not be privy in the future to know the impact you had in their lives. But I'll give you a little exemplar of what I was told in my graduate program. It's kind of like pointing a laser beam at the moon. If you move that laser beam just 1 degree to the left or the right, by the time the light gets to the moon, it will never hit the moon. So what I'm saying is if you change a life trajectory just a little bit, and you see that trajectory change just a little bit, you can assume that it's going to compound itself over the years of that person's life, and your mentor relationship will be successful and highly so without your ever knowing it. And Tom, I'm sure you have something to add.
Yeah, one other little short story, and this was a young man who became an Eagle Scout 2 weeks before his 18th birthday. And I'm not talking about myself, but a young man that I know. And he was going off to college, wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do, but got involved with Navy ROTC, and again, an Eagle Scout going into that. And he he found out about midway through college that his acceptance at this very prestigious university had come down to a couple of positions that they had left. He had better than average grades, but the fact that he was an Eagle Scout put him over the top. And he was told by his counselor at the start of his junior year that that was a major factor in his acceptance at the university, and they also saw it in how he approached his studies. Very dedicated to his studies and very focused on it. When he graduated, he ended up going on into the Navy, and he'd talked about flying at one point. In fact, that started back in his scouting days. And when he had to go before the review board to determine whether he would become a Navy pilot or not, they spent probably 40% of that interview talking about what it meant to him to be an Eagle Scout. And it turned out that that was also a major factor there. He went on and he flew for a whole career in the Navy. And when it was time for him to retire, he started thinking about, well, what am I going to do now? And somewhere along the line, he got interested in a medical program, applied to medical school, and got accepted, and heard the same thing again. The fact that he was an Eagle Scout and all that he'd accomplished with that and accomplished in the Navy based on being an Eagle Scout to the most part played a major factor in him getting into medical school. And what I'm saying is just an example that this young man portrayed of how his life was a whole succession of very successful attempts and very successful accomplishments. And the last time I talked to him about it, he said he really doubts whether that would have all happened if he had not really buckled down and paid attention and worked on becoming an Eagle Scout. And he took a few more minutes to describe how his scout leaders, and he'd been in a couple of troops, how they had played a major role in guiding him towards Eagle rather than directing him or kind of pulling him by the coattails to make it to Eagle before he turned 18, which he did. So there are a lot of stories out there. And if we talk to our friends or talk to our scouts that we're working with in units, I think you'll find there are a lot of success stories in terms of how mentorship has paid off.
Yeah, and I'm preaching to the choir saying this, that achieving the Eagle rank isn't the patch or the medal or the certificate on the wall. Those are just signposts for the achievement. And that achievement was gained through an ongoing process of learning, growing, and developing. And a mentor can be incredibly important in a person's life if the mentor points these things out to the scout. Again, we talked about the celebration, what the scout is doing well, what the scout is having some challenges with. Create in that scout a conscious review of what she or he is doing along the way, and they'll discover on their own how they're developing. They'll discover on their own what skills they're developing, and then the forward lookers will know this is a skill that's easily transferable to college, to employment, to relationships I'll manage in the future. So this just an incredible amount of growth can occur just from the conscious understanding and identifying what's going on in their head and their experience. And the
Absolutely.
mentor is in a perfect position to do that ongoing review with the scout.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, I think we've probably got some questions that are lined up there. And before we do that, on my own part, and I'm sure I speak for both of us here, that we want to thank everyone again for joining in on this and learning what mentoring is all about and what it can be and the successes you can have with it, whether you're a leader of a troop or somehow otherwise involved in scouting. Um, you enter the world of mentoring that will not only give you a lot of satisfaction in life from the mentee products that you produce through that relationship, but especially if you keep in mind that mentorship works best when it's intentional on both sides. So with that, again, thank you very much. And I don't know what the process is here in terms of answering additional questions, but
Well,
Actually, we don't have any more questions in the queue, so just a couple more closing comments and we can wrap this up. So just some heads up, if you will. In building a relationship, whether it's a single relationship with a scout, whether it's building a council-wide mentoring program, start small. Build just one strong pairing to begin with, then another and another and another. And if you're in a position to influence it, start shaping something that lasts beyond individual effort. That's where real impact shows up.
so with that,
Yeah, can I just
go ahead.
need to mention that this final slide. And Mike, you want
Yes,
to
thank you.
address this final slide? Or Tom, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Mark. Go
Okay.
ahead.
And just as in mentoring, assessment data is critical for us in the training committee as we continue planning and presenting these webinars for you. And a great deal of that data comes from you, the ones tuning into these webinars. So please, please follow the QR code on the screen right now to complete an evaluation of tonight's presentation. And again, thanks so much for joining us and best of luck as you enter the world of mentoring, not only for Eagle candidates, but scouts in general.
Thank you, Tom and Mark. Excellent job as always. I also want you to think about one other thing. These mentees that you're working with will become mentors, and you are their first teacher on mentoring. Can imagine the young man that Tom was describing coming back to scouting as a mentor, how powerful that would be given that person's experiences working with Tom. And could you use another adult in your unit, maybe another adult in your district or council to help you manage this program, encourage this program, and grow this program? With that said, this is the last webinar for this year. Our next one will be in September. Uh, so please look for that as we start promoting it, probably starting in early August after the Jamboree. With that, thank you again for your participation in this webinar. We appreciate your time and effort and all the things that you do to support scouting in your local community and at the national level. Thank you again. Have a great Sunday.